Hey all, today in episode 2 of Kevin's Coding Bites, we're talking about loading and displaying data in an iOS application using the SAP Cloud Platform SDK for iOS and the convenient data service API we get generated by the iOS assistant. So we will start out with a generated project, and then from there I'm going to show you how to load data and display them on the table. So what we got here is our main storyboard. I've set up a basic app structure already. So we have a navigation controller, we have a customer table view controller, which is just standard table view controller, and we will have a create customer view controller, which will have like a create screen for a customer in here as well. So to get started, we just go into the customer table view controller. This is the view controller class I created beforehand. And here we have a SAP Fiori loading indicator. We are using a logger. We have the segue identifier for the created segue already. And then we have the method stubs for everything we need. So the first step would be actually getting the destinations as an NS dictionary of our mobile services account. So let's say let destinations. And we will need those destinations to actually access or retrieve our data service. So let's see, we need the file configuration provider, and then in here we will find the app parameters, and from there we go and say give us the provided configuration. For the field destinations, or with the key destinations actually, and we force cast that to an NS dictionary. Next, we retrieve the data service. So, file configuration provider. There you go. Okay, var data service. And then in here, this is going to be an ASBM container, and I talk about that in a second. And we're using an online data provider because we're not using offline data. And then we do something in here. This is a computed property, so computed properties have a block here where you can define what that property represents or should give back. We're going to implement that in a second, but first, this ESPM container, and I've talked about that in other videos before, is our convenience data service generated by the assistant. So the assistant fetches the metadata document fetches the metadata document which defines your data service. And it fetches that and generates all those proxy classes out of it. So we have like stocks and suppliers, but we also have an ESPM container with all the convenience methods in there for fetching, creating, updating entities. So let's go back into our customer table view controller and implement that here. So first we will get the data controller here. So the data controller is in the onboarding session manager, or we can retrieve it over the onboarding session manager. And we will get the shared instance, and we get the onboarding session, which is an optional. And then we say, give us the data controllers, which is a dictionary, using our destinations dictionary for our destination identifier. And then we say this is a string, and here we do a save cast to SAP EDM sample service online data controller. This gets generated by the assistant, and then from here we can say give us the data service, or safely unwrap the data service as well, which is the data controller ESPN container. So this is a guard statement, and what we did in here is we defined certain information we want to retrieve, and those are optional, so we gotta save unwrap them. We can do that in one guard statement, so we don't have to have like multiple guard statements here. So anyway, in a case here where this should be nil, like one of those values, we display an alert with a localized string, and then in here we say, I don't know, oh, data service is not reachable. We don't have a comment. For the error, we have no error here. And then for the view controller, where it should be displayed itself. And of course, we gotta return out of here, so we return nil. And then in case we get all those values, we can return the data service. So next would be if we wanna fetch customers, we got to save them or store them somewhere. So what we do is we create an array, private var customers, of type custom array, and customer in this case is one of those proxy classes. So you can just simply instantiate those or use them as types, because those proxy classes are strongly typed Swift classes. So we say private var, and we want to save the selected customer for a later bit. Here, we actually just define that as an optional. All right. So next step would be to register the table view cells we want to use. So we want to say table view.register FUI object table view cell.self for FUI object table view cell reuse identifier, and then we set up a couple of table view options. So we say the estimated row height here is 120, and the table view, and the reason for that is because we want to make sure that the cell is going to be displayed properly. And the row height is going to be UITableView automatic dimension, which also helps the table view to decide how to resize their cells. All right. So the next part was actually loading some data. So we call a method called load data, and we're going to implement that. Add func load data. So we're loading data as soon as the view did load. We start by showing our priori loading indicator, and then we call a method which is not implemented yet, fetch customers, which will have a completion handler. And in here we say self table view dot reload data, and we say self height my theory loading indicator. All right, let's implement the fetch customers. Private func fetch customers, and this, people, is the same for all proxy classes, right? If you call fetch customers, fetch product, fetch sales orders, whatever, this is always the same flow, the same way you implement that, right? Or almost the same. So you pretty much call data service fetch customers, and that's it. You can do some alternations in that. You can define data queries, which we will get to in a second. But this is really a convenient data service we get here from the assistant. All right. So first, we define a data query. And this data query allows you to do OData specific operations, right? In our case, we want to order our customers by the customer.last name, but also each customer has a relationship with sales orders, and has a property sales order. So we want to make sure we also load the sales orders with the customers. So we can say we do an expand with the sales orders. So we will get the sales orders loaded with the customers being stored in each customer's sales orders property. So we can access those. That's cool. So data service, and now it's interesting. So data service, and we just say fetch customers matching my query. And you don't have to use a query. If you just want to straight up fetch the customers, you can just don't define the data query and say fetch customers. So that's no big deal. In here, we will have a weak reference to self, because we don't know if the user's going to navigate out of that screen or not. And we don't want to make sure we access self if self is not existent anymore. So in here, we gotta look for if there's an error or not. So we just safely unwrap error and then say, you know what, I'm not going to code that the whole thing again. We're just saying, okay, if there is an error, we just show an alert here where we just say, fail to load the list of customers. And I've copied that out of a different project. That's the reason why there's products in there. All right. In the case that there is no error, we probably have data, or we're pretty sure we have data. So we can say customers, and then we just say this is the result. We could also, because it's an array, we could just not do an assignment. We could just also say append. We just compile and see if we haven't compiled time error. Nope, probably not. Also, we gotta call the completion handler down here. So we will end up back in this fetch customers block where we reload the data of the table view. And that's it. We loaded customers. Now we can actually go in and implement the data source methods. So here we have the number of sections. We only want one section. Then we have the number of rows and sections, which would be the customers to count, like the amount of customers we got. And here, here we actually dequeue the reusable cell. Sorry. Let customer is customers at that specific row. And then we get the current customer we're actually displaying. And then we dequeue a customer cell, which is an FUI object table view cell. Via the table view, dequeue reusable cell with identifier, FUI object table view cell reuse identifier for the index path this data source method passes in. And then we pretty much fill that cell with information. So we say customer cell. Let's just do one more setup. Customer cell dot accessory type, and the accessory type is that symbol you see on the right hand side. So if you want to do a navigation, you actually want to implement that as a disclosure indicator. Why can you not just call that customers dot index path? All right. Now we fill the cell with information. Customer cell dot headline text. I forgot to. Sorry. See, you see, it's totally live. I forgot to cast that to an FUI table view cell. FUI object table view cell. There we go. And then we can access the headline text, which is going to be the customer name. And the customer name we gotta produce. So you know what? Let's do it that way. We define a string, and in here we access our customer variable. Customer first name. This is an optional, so we gotta give him an alternative value if the first name is null. I'll just say it's an empty string. And we want to not only show the first name, but also the last name. So we say customer dot last name, and we do the same thing. Turn an empty string if that value is null. Now we can set a placeholder image, and it would be great if that backend would actually have customer images, but in that case we don't have that. So we want to make sure we show a little bit of something. So we have the detail image view here, and we say image equals to FUI icon library system.me. So we can use the FUI icon library here, but we could also use SF symbols, and then we could just say UI image, and then we could say system name. And then we just define that here as a string. And if you don't know what those are called, we have the SF Symbols app where you can look for person, for example. And then in here we have like a person circle. So we can just say in here person dot circle if we want to do that. But for now, we just use the FUI library and say system. And then the last bit is to tell the detail image view to be circular, because it's just a little bit more pretty. Next would be to put in the customer date of birth, and I prepped that because we're running out of time a little bit. But what we basically do here is we save and wrap the customer date of birth, and then we use a date formatter to simply format it to the date style medium to just show month, day, and year. And that's what we want. The last thing is customer cell dot footnote text, and here we want to show the fetched sales orders. So we can say number of sales orders, and then again we just use this notation here, and then we say customer dot sales orders dot count. Just show the number of sales orders here, and then we return the customer cell. All right. So the next bit would actually be, I think we can run that thing now. Let's run it. Let's see what happens. All right, so what did we do here? We defined the data service. Actually, we retrieved the data service from the onboarding session manager. We defined some class properties which store our fetch customers. We defined our table view and registered a table view cell in the view that load and called load data. We've implemented load data with a fetch customers method, which has an escape and close completion handler. So we get notified if that guy is done with his work, and we can reload our table view, and then we just simply implemented the table view data sources here. And let's see how that looks like. Here it is. All right, we deployed the app, and we should actually see some data here. So let's go in. And we see our customers showing up here. We see we have that beautiful accessory type over here. We have a plus button, and I already implemented the navigation and the segues and stuff like that because this is not part of the topic. I also created the create customer screen using the FUI form table view controller, where I can use FUI form cells of different types. So we're using a key value form cell, a date picker form cell, an FUI button form cell. We define the table view again, how it looks like, and then we got some customer logic. So we're just make sure the views display the right information. But the interesting part is, and if you're interested in how to build screens like that, we have tutorials online at developers.sap.com showing you things like that. But important is if the user is here and navigates into a customer, we actually want to make sure we can change values in here, right? For example, we can change the first name for whatever reason. And then we can say update. And as soon as we hit update, did that work? Cut. So we see our customers in a list here with the sales orders we retrieved over the expand. We can navigate into a customer, make changes with an update, or we can create a new customer here, right? And we're using the same view controller for it. That's the reason why the logic is a little bit lengthy here. But in the end, if the user hits or taps on update customer, we're actually calling an update entity request of the data service. And let's see how that works. So first of all, again, we show the theory loading indicator here. We do some logging, and then we just simply call, and there is a generic method for that. Data service.update entity, and we just pass in the entity we want to update. So we put in the customer, and the customer values just got simply changed by the user over the time with us listening with on-change handlers to those cells. So we always have the newest information in our customer. Of course, you would need some verification if the values are correct in there, but I don't have that in there yet. Anyway, we check for errors again. And then here we dispatch back to the main queue and get rid of of that create screen or update screen actually. And then we dismiss our view and show a toast message that we updated the value. And then we call table updater dot entity set has changed. And that's pretty cool. We get a simple table updater generated, which is this lengthy ComSub EDMS sample service to entity set updater delegate, which can use to actually let the customer table view controller know who is implementing that, right? And just calling load data to update its view. And that's pretty much it. You just call update entity, handle the errors, and then just, for example, call that entity set has changed. And there are different ways of doing that. You don't have to use our protocol here, or delegate protocol. In the case for creating a customer, I've implemented it already as well, just to shorten the time. But we have the Fiori loading indicator in here, and we set a new UID string. Of course, there are better ways to do that, but we can do that in a simple way, just to give that customer a customer ID for now. And then we have a generic method we can use where we can say create entity, and we can throw in a customer or product or sales order or whatever. And the data service does the rest for us. We just got to handle our errors again and dismiss our views and go back and reload the new customer we've created. So let's see how that looks like. Let's just create a customer for now. So let's go in here. And then we call that. Oops. And the first name is Thomas. And I don't know its birth date, so let's just make him as old as I am. We have some street, and we have some house number, and we have some city, and we have a postal code, and we have a country, and then we say create, loading indicator spins, we get our push our toast message here, and then we should actually see that somewhere, hopefully. There's me, and there's our Thomas. There you go. And that's pretty much it. And that's how you would go in and build your app, loading data into your app. You simply use this convenience data service and just access its methods here. And you always have like variations of those methods you can use. And remember, for creating, updating, or deleting, you're using the generic methods update entity, create entity, or delete the entity. And with that, I want to close my Kevin's Coding Bytes episode today, and I hope you had fun, and see you next time.